Welcome back, fiber friends, to another episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. Today's episode is going to be all about pet yarn. Pet yarn is actually a really wide category of yarns. There's cat yarn, there's rabbit yarn, there's dog yarn. Today we're going to be focusing on dog yarn because I have a dog. I've spun a lot of dog yarn. I try to spin at least one skein of my dog's hair every single year that he's been alive. And he's coming up on year 4. I've actually turned some of this yarn into a scarf in previous projects. And the history of dog yarn is actually really fascinating. People have been spinning dog hair and actually purposefully breeding dogs that have really woolly coats in the PNW and sort of the BC, British Columbia area in Canada. Anyone who knows anything about this history knows that these are called the Salish woolly dogs. But today is definitely an episode for the weirdos out there. A lot of people are just kind of disgusted right off the bat by dog yarn. I am going to try to address those concerns the best that I can and kind of pose this to you in this way. The fact of the matter is, most of us wash our dogs, right? We give them regular baths. I give my dog a regular bath. He's clean, okay? And with that logic, right, the hair that I'm harvesting from him, I brush this off of him. I don't shave it off of him. The brushings that I get from him are then also clean. Also, once I'm done, spinning the yarn, I also wash my yarn. Are you washing your yarn? Are you not washing your hand-spun yarn? You should not be doing that. Besides the fact that, washing yarn sets twist, it also just cleans it. It gives it a further cleaning step. And so to everybody who feels like this is kind of gross because it's dirty, it's not dirty. I think mentally, some people, especially those who don't have pets or don't have a dog, this can seem a little gross to them. But the fact of the matter is, it's perfectly sanitary, and again, this is a practice that has actually been going on for a really long time, because dog fiber has some really unique qualities that are actually very similar to things like cashmere, and in fact, dog fur, especially dog down, is 80% warmer than wool, so it's actually a really warm, essentially luxury fiber. The fiber is also very, very lightweight, so although it keeps you super warm, it's going to be very, very fine, and it's just very lightweight in general. This skein weighs virtually nothing. Now, in terms of cons, okay, this is not the easiest fiber to spin. Anybody who's spun pet hair before, even longer pet hair, is going to tell you that it's not as easy as a spin as wool is. Now, that being said, I do think it's easier than spinning cotton. Personally, in my experience, I think it's easier to spin than cotton. Whether you're spinning it 100% by itself, like this skein, or blended with something, I think that cotton and a lot of cellulose fibers are actually a tougher spin than something like dog hair, because although it doesn't have the pronounced scale structure, obviously, that a fiber like wool does, or even alpaca, it does have some scale structure, and so it does hold together a little bit easier, and it kind of sticks to itself. Now, not dissimilar to a lot of Angora rabbit yarns, if you do not add enough twist to these yarns, they are going to shed, okay? So I do recommend making a test skein if you're looking to make a few skeins of dog yarn. If you want to make a batch for a project, please, 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 please do a test skein, do a test swatch, because the amount that is going to shed is going to surprise you. This is one of those fibers that is so short that you are going to be 1000% sure that you have over twisted this yarn and overspun it to hell, and then you're going to apply it back on itself and it's going to be barely holding together. Now, how the heck did I get into spinning pet yarn in the first place? As I mentioned, I do have a dog. He's an Anatolian Shepherd. He's double coated, so that gives me the ability to essentially get the creme de la creme of dog fiber, right? That downy undercoat is one of the best things to spin. It's very, very soft. And if you brush your dog out during the right time of year, there's going to be less guard hairs and a lot more of that soft down. And so that tends to be the fiber that I try to harvest from my dog and then spin into yarn. I think this makes a really beautiful keepsake item just by itself, even if you never use the yarn, but I think it also is a really beautiful thing to work into a keepsake scarf or a hat or something like that. And then not too long ago, I got this entire box of dog fiber. There was a spinner nearby me that was moving out of the house that they were living in. They really needed to downsize their spinning equipment, their fibers, all of this stuff. She did not think anybody would want this box of dog fibers followers. Obviously, she had not met me yet. This box is so cool. It has a bunch of different dog fibers in it. I think I've gone over it in a previous video. Maybe I haven't. But just really briefly, since we're going to be spinning some of these later, I'll go over them. I have this Chow Chow mix. This is what I have the most of, and I'm really excited to spin this because I've heard Chow Chow makes a really good yarn. Some of them do have names, and some of them are spun up already. Like, there's a sample in here that is 50/50 dog wool, dog/wool, blended dog, Chow Chow, and Corriedale. There's a sample of that. In here, Poolie. I didn't know about this, or I didn't know the name of this breed, really, but I do have some Poolie hair in here that I'm really excited to spin, because those are really, really unique dogs. We have a Collie. I feel like that's another, like, super duper soft dog. Oh my gosh, there's more spun yarn in here than I thought. I'm going to have to store these properly. As you can see, essentially, I have a giant box of dog hair. Some of them have dates on them and names of the dogs as well, which is even cuter. And then full disclosure, at the very end of this video, I am going to include a very short list of dogs, dog breeds specifically, that if the opportunity arose, I would love the chance to get to spin. If any of my followers happen to want to help with this task because they own a dog of this breed, they know someone who owns a dog of this breed, they'd be willing to brush them out, put the fiber in a box for me, and send it along. Ideally, I know a lot of that fiber was stored in plastic bags, right? We'd like to avoid storing it in a plastic bag. So maybe while you're collecting it, if you could store it in a box, and then you could put it in a plastic bag just for transport. I don't know, we could talk about logistics if anybody even takes me up on this offer. But yeah, I'll include that list of dog breeds at the very end, because I would like to, I don't know, this is something I would like to kind of practice more. I love spinning different sheep breeds, and so the idea of kind of including, like, different dog breeds in this would be really interesting to me. This entire episode is also heavily inspired from and pulled from the fur edition of Ply Magazine. It's the one with the Angora rabbits on the front. I'm actually gonna pull it out for you guys. Yeah, so this is the edition of Ply Magazine. As you can see, it says fur. It has the Angora rabbits on it. On the side, it is the spring 2020 issue, and it's on cat, dog, wolf, rabbit, chinchilla, possum, and more. Okay, and inside of this little edition, there is a, maybe I can find it real quick. Oh, yeah, it's one of the pages that opened up pretty quickly because I reference this all the time. This is a micron chart for dogs, for different dog breeds. I'm obsessed with this. Although I don't currently have the ability to rate the micron count of these dogs, right? I am just beginning my wool grading journey and getting into, like, the education and the courses that I need to be able to understand more about wool grading. I do feel like I can make some kind of, like, educational chart, at least based on my experiences spinning these different dog breeds. And so, I don't know, I would like to contribute. I would like to contribute to the greater research that has kind of been going on about, like, dog fibers, especially in this modern day and age of, like, we're trying to waste as little as possible. We're trying to find sustainable options for things. Again, dog fur is incredibly, incredibly warm, and a lot of dogs shed a ton. A lot of people joke all the time, I could knit an entire sweater out of how much fur my dog sheds. Maybe you should. I don't know. A little bit about Chiengora, or dog yarn. Chien comes from the French word for dog. It's pushed together with the word Angora, which a lot of people are familiar with, both Angora goats and Angora rabbits. Both produce a beautiful fiber. When you push those words together, you get Chiengora, dog yarn. I think a lot of people prefer to refer to it as Chiengora because it's less, like, shocking and has less of, like, a shock factor than just saying, like, dog yarn. And today I kind of wanted to talk about the history of dog yarn that we know about here in the US and in Canada in terms of Indigenous people. So the Salish woolly dog was a little white dog that was bred essentially for its wool. We think that the origins of the breed are probably from a Spitz type dog. So think Pomeranian, Shiba Inu. Samoyeds are, like, a really large Spitz type dog. That's most likely what these dogs were, what the, like, base genes for these dogs were from. And what we know about the dogs is, in most cases, for these indigenous tribes that lived on the coastal PNW, again, the coastal Salish people, and then up in the sort of like BC area of Canada, is that they would have these dogs sort of segregated on these islands so that they wouldn't interbreed with the other types of hunting dogs. This was a really carefully cultivated and like very specifically fed breed of dog. Okay, so I pulled these a lot of this next information from Hakai Magazine, Coastal Science and Societies, and specifically their article, The Dogs That Grow Wool and the People Who Love Them. So indigenous women specifically would travel to these coastal islands in canoes twice a year. Once a year, well, both times they would deliver like food and snacks. A lot of the times like really high quality protein based diets is what we can gather is what these dogs were feeding off of. A lot of fish. Once a year, they would come to the island and they would literally just brush the dogs out. They would just like comb them out so that their lustrous locks wouldn't be tangled. They would be kept from matting. And then the second time that they would visit, they would shear the dogs. They would shear the dogs too, really similarly to the way that we shear sheep. There's actually a quote from John Vancouver in 1792. They, the dogs, were shorn as close to the skin as sheep are in England, and so compact were their fleeces that large portions could be lifted from the corner without causing any separation. The wool dogs are also noted as not specifically barking, as specifically like howling and kind of howling along with the singing that the indigenous women would do when they were taking part in this work. Now, by 1858, we know that these dogs were almost extinct. By 1859, one of the last recorded examples of this dog that we had, Mutton, passed away. And Mutton you might have heard of because Mutton is super famous in that Mutton is the last hide of a dog like this that we have. So we actually have the hide of Mutton sort of in museum preservation. I'm going to insert a little photo over here. These dogs were bred and worked by for over 5,000 years. And I think it's really, really sad that this is kind of the last remnant that we have of these dogs. And although it's not highlighted in this specific article, which I do find a little like unfortunate, more than a little unfortunate, I do think it's important to note too that the Salish woolly dogs didn't just disappear. They didn't just disappear because like indigenous people stopped caring for them or there wasn't an ability to maintain the breed. They were eradicated by colonizers, by our government, and by the Canadian government. And I really think that's important to note. These dogs were purposefully eliminated by our government. Okay, they didn't just disappear from indigenous life. That's not how that works. That's not what happened. There's a lot of notes talking about too how this specific tribe is so unique in being able to cultivate this specific dog breed because they had such an abundant and fruitful life where they were living. They had all the resources they needed, and so they had the ability to put extra time into distinctively breeding different dog breeds. I just think that's really cool. I think it's really sad that their history was eradicated in this way. And actually, the history was denied, in fact, despite the indigenous people saying, yes, this practice existed, we have evidence of this. Historians denied this practice for years and years and years because they claimed they had no evidence that there were ever any woven blankets or any sort of like woven garments that featured dog hair. Meanwhile, they just had not tested the garments that they had. They had not tested there were a bunch of woven blankets that were woven out of a 50-50 goat-dog blend because that was the most common blend in that area. They tended not to blend the fiber with wool or use it alone. They would actually blend it with the mountain goats that were available in the area. Not that dissimilar from like a mohair or like a cashmere goat that you would see today. And it's actually really fascinating because there was one group of women that would dedicate their whole lives to getting this goat fiber, and then there was a whole nother group of women in the tribe that would dedicate their whole lives to getting this dog fiber, and then they would come together and trade it and weave it and spin it and turn it into new things. And I just think that's really cool. I just think that this is such an interesting facet of history, and I think it's such a shame that it was so consistently erased for so many years and like denied when the evidence for it was available. It was in the museum's possession. Even more interestingly, all of the dog bones that were ever found around these tribes were literally just labeled as wolf. They were just labeled as like dog bones with no further like explanation or looking into what types of bones these were. And then upon further examination, it was shown that all of these dog bones were far too small to belong to a wolf. They clearly belonged to these Salish woolly dogs and other hunting dogs that this tribe had. And so that is sort of like, that's the history I'm going to give you today on, spinning dog fiber, on Chiengora. That's a little bit of the background. There is a lot of evidence to show that spinning dog hair and keeping dog hair and trying to preserve dog hair in general became really popular during the Renaissance era and also in the Victorian era, where you see hair art just have a renaissance in general. Now we have the modern age, okay? Our modern age, and even going back to like the 90s, there was actually a really, really popular book that I wanted to bring up. I've brought it up before on this podcast, but it's Knitting with Dog Hair by Kendall Crolius and Anne Montgomery. Better a sweater from a dog you know than a sheep you'll never meet. That's the tagline. This book has been in production for a really long time. It's kind of a joke in the publishing world. Like, they keep producing it even in years where it doesn't get a lot of buys, because at some point it always has like a revival and people become interested in spinning pet hair and using pet hair in their art again. And so I just think it's cool that like even in modern iterations, this is a practice that has really never gone away completely, and people have always been interested in the subject. Now that we have a little history, a little context, a little background for what we're doing here today, it's time to spin some dog hair. Okay, as I said, I think I'm going to start with our Chow Chow. I think I'm going to start with our Chow Chow mix. I'm going to show you guys how I set up the wheel and all of that stuff. Full disclosure, this might be spun over a number of days because I do have a full-time job alongside producing this wonderful content for you guys. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to produce this content, because if not, I would just be yapping the ear off of, frankly, whatever poor soul got caught in this whole orbit. So thank you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe before we continue, and let's get to spinning. I'm sorry, the last thing I'm going to share before we start spinning is Ply Magazine's simplified possible reasons for why dogs have historically not been major fiber producers. I find them really hilarious. Maybe you will too. First is the diet. Dogs eat meat, so they are really just high cost to feed in general. The next reason is temperament. Dogs can be aggressive. That is a really good considering factor. There's a risk of harm to handlers and other animals. Dogs are intelligent. Smart animals are difficult. Anyone who owns animals will tell you that the smarter the animal, frankly, the more difficult. If they're dumb, I can trick them. I can only trick a smart animal once. And that is a problem. And then monetary gain. Our culture does not use dog byproducts in general, which is true. In the US specifically, we don't really use dog byproducts for anything. In fact, there are some laws that kind of prevent that from occurring. But in other places, they do use the other byproducts of dogs. And in those societies, I would imagine that I actually know for a fact that the pelts definitely get used. And so I think there's a lot of reasons that, dogs have never become like a proper livestock animal like many other domestic breeds. We kind of domesticated them as working partners and not as much as like a supplemental form of like food or any other type of product. We're going to be using my fast whirl for this, my like high speed whirl. I don't really know if I want to use 21-to-1 or 18-to-1. I think we're going to start with an 18-to-1 ratio and then see if I need to adjust it from there. If you're new here, you don't already know this, but I don't sell wheels in any capacity. I bought both of my wheels secondhand. I didn't even buy them from the companies that they're from. I don't have any relationship with either of the companies. What I will say is I did buy this wheel, my Shacked Matchless, for projects like this, right? My Shacked, the reason that she is my baby and I adore her is just I feel like she's so capable of literally spinning everything. Like, my real limit is orifice size. At the end of the day, the orifice size is my limit on how thick I can spin, but otherwise, I just feel like I don't really have any limits with the shaft. Like, if I want to spin cotton, I can spin cotton. If I want to spin Surrey alpaca, I can spin Surrey alpaca. If I want to make really thick yarn, I can, and if I want to make something super duper lightweight, I can as well. And that's why, again, I really enjoy this wheel. It's not for everybody. Again, I think that it is hard to judge whether or not a wheel is for you unless you've tried it. So just asking people, like, would you recommend X wheel for a beginner? No, because I wouldn't recommend or not recommend any wheel for a beginner, because that's not how you should be going about finding the wheel for you. You should really, if you're gonna spend $600 to $1,000, sometimes more, on a piece of equipment, you should make sure it's the right piece of equipment. You should test drive the car before you drive it off the lot. Sometimes I feel like I'm beating a dead horse by saying this, but I get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of DMs every single day being like, should I buy this wheel? I don't know. How tall are you? How short are you? Do you have knee pain? Do you have hip pain? Do you have any, like, chronic pain that I should be aware of? Just asking me, somebody who doesn't sell wheels, I really need to emphasize that. Someone who doesn't sell wheels. I've tried a lot of spinning wheels, but I don't sell wheels, and so I don't have all of the facts for you either. And two, at the end of the day, like, spinning wheel companies, oh my god, it's so much like cars, in fact. It's so much like buying a car, okay? It's expensive. I can't tell you whether or not you need, like, a Ford pickup truck or, like, a Tesla truck. I don't know what your, like, where your politics lie or anything like that, and I don't know, like, if you want to buy from a company that is, like, US manufacturing, does some of their manufacturing or, like, parts making overseas. Like, that's your business. That's not mine. And I'm also not going to listen to all of these literally, like dozens of variables and then try to give you a response on the wheel that you should buy. Because again, there's like hundreds of different types of spinning wheels, and there's antique wheels. Like, yeah, that's all I feel like I need to say on this. Like, I feel like that is enough of an explanation as to why I can't just tell you what wheel to buy. I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. Okay, so here is the Chow Chow fiber, and you know, something that you'll know already if you work with dogs or you brush your dog on the reg is that just holding dog hair in your hand is going to start to warm up. It is so incredibly warm. And if you are someone who is familiar with dogs, you might already, or with separating fibers in general, it's going to be pretty easy for you to ID the guard hairs. Now, I have to say, the guard hairs for this chow, while, like, clearly very long and distinct compared to the, like, shorter, downier fibers that you see here, like, here's another one. I feel like they're very obvious. These guard hairs are much softer than the guard hairs on my dog. I will note that. I think that depending on the dog breed, it will be easier, / your yarn is just naturally gonna be softer. A lot of people have asked me questions about, like, poodle micron count and, like, spinning poodle fiber. I think that it would be easy. I think. Maybe I'd be wrong. But I don't know how soft it would be. I know that poodles are soft. All dogs are soft, though, in my opinion. I don't know. I pet a lot of dogs. Most dogs are pretty dang soft. It's just different when you're spinning it up. I feel like if you're a spinner, you kind of know that. You guys are just gonna have to put up with the clicking from this whirl, because my high-speed whirl, this is what it sounds like. This is the sound that it makes. I am doing kind of a short forward, short backward, sometimes draw for this. And much like with cotton, I struggle to get my tensioning right. 2 notes that I'll say on this. First, the little, like, specks of red, like really red, like ginger fiber in the Chow Chow. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. It really is magnificent. I love Chow Chows. I know they are a controversial breed. I do think they're beautiful dogs, though, and I have had the good graces of meeting a lot of really well-bred and well-behaved Chow Chows, and so I do think I'm a little biased. I really like them. The next thing I will note is that, similarly to cotton, I personally have a little trouble getting my tensioning exactly right. The window in which my tension is correct is short, And so therefore I do end up having to adjust it a lot, right? Because as the yarn starts to build up on the bobbin, I quickly am out of that tension window. But also, there's just a very fine line between having enough tension to pull the yarn onto the bobbin and having too much and it kind of ripping the fiber out of your hands, which is never what we want. Spinning dog hair is just one of those things that I really think you need to practice and you need to take your time. I recommend trying to go like very high ratio, very high twist with this. Even if you're going to actually draft the yarn on the thicker side, I still just think it's just easier when you have a lot more twists to work with. Because, right, if I had this on, like, a 10-to-1 ratio right now, I would be treadling for my life. I really would. Just to, like, get the yarn to stick together. And then I did just want to provide another angle on the fiber. Again, this is how it looks close up. This is our ply back test. I really like how this one is looking. This doesn't look too dissimilar from a lot of the samples that are already in the box. And then this is what it looks like actually on the bobbin. Alrighty, it's Monday. I am spinning the Chow Chow. It's still on the wheel. I'm just trying to spin all of it, frankly. I'm trying to make a big skein. I think I'm going to chain ply it, make it a 3-ply. I don't know, man. That's what my heart of hearts is feeling. That's what I really want to do with this sample. I'm having a lot of fun spinning it. More fun than I thought I was going to have. I feel like I already said that, but it's been a pleasure to spin. It's been a really easy spin compared to my dog's like undercoat down fiber. But it also just could be that I've had some practice, and that certainly helps as well. But I wanted to talk about these samples because I organized a lot of them, and I matched them to names, breeds, dates in some cases. Let's talk about it. Sample number 1, I love sample number 1. Sample number 1 is Ralph. We have no information on Ralph, besides the fact that his name is Ralph. Clearly he was brown. I would call him in the range, like, he's pretty soft. Like, whatever Ralph is, he was a really soft breed with not a ton of guard hairs, at least to my touch, okay? I'm gonna put him at, like, I'm gonna put him in the middle group. I'm gonna put him at, like, a 5 for, like, average softness in terms of dog hair, right? Next up, we have sample number 2. Sample number 2 is a Cocker Spaniel. I don't have any other information other than it's a Cocker Spaniel, and I will say this is one of the coarser samples. Like, I put this closer to like an 8 or a 9 in terms of, like, dog hair yarn coarseness. This has a lot of guard hairs in it. And then sample number 3, this one is probably my favorite of, like, this bunch. This is Sassy. Sassy is Wendy's Sheltie, and the actual hair, we have a date to connect to it, August 1986. I love this one. It's really soft. I have to say, this is another one of the softer samples. I would even go as saying, like, I don't know, a 3 or a 4. It's even softer than Ralph. So, I don't know. It's just so cool to have these samples of fiber. Again, I got this whole collection at an estate sale. It was in a box that was clearly mailed to somebody for teaching a spinning class. She had mentioned that she had taught, like, a handful of classes on spinning pet fiber, and she wanted to source a few different dog breeds so that she could use them in the class. So that's where a lot of the, like, names and information are coming from. I'm not sure if she spun these samples or if the class as a whole spun these samples. I'm unsure of all of that information. But we have 3 more samples that I also properly identified. So sample number 4 is a poodle clipping from Carolyn's friend. I don't know who Carolyn's friend is. Nope, this one is not the poodle clipping. This one is. This is the poodle clipping. This one is coarse. This is, like, probably the coarsest sample that I have in here. I know that maybe you can see the guard hairs just, like, sticking out, or just the structure of the hair in general, right? Because, like, isn't it that, like, poodles have hair, not fur? And that's kind of one of the reasons that some people don't have as much of an allergic reaction to them. I might be getting that wrong. So, like, dog people, feel free to correct me down below. I want to have the accurate information. But the poodle, I have to say, is probably the coarsest yarn of all of the bunch. And that's really saying something because first I have number 7 here. Before I go to number 6, let's talk about number 7. Number 7 is from a Poolie. I think it was someone on YouTube who helped me figure out what that breed was on the bag that it was labeled. Because I was familiar with what a Poolie looks like. I'll insert a picture here. I didn't understand. I didn't know that was how it was spelled. Puli. Hakai. I think this is one of the coolest samples that's in here. Besides number 6, which is probably my favorite, number 7 is like probably my second favorite. And the pulley is, again, like surprisingly soft. This is really soft. I would say this is like one of the softest fibers of the bunch, and you might not expect that based on how the pulley looks, but I'm just telling it like it is. I'm telling you based on the samples that I have. And then we have, oh, I'm sorry, it's not number 6, it's number 5. This sample is definitely one of the coarser ones as well. It's not the coarsest, but I'd put it on the same realm as like, it's softer than the Cocker Spaniel, but it's definitely a little coarser than Ralph, okay? That's what I'll say. Number 5 is a Russian Wolfhound, and I just really cherish this one. I didn't even know there were Russian Wolfhounds. I mean, like, I guess I could have presumed that there were different Wolfhounds based on what I know about, like, dogs, but I was just unfamiliar with the breed, so I think the sample is really cool. And then for any of you curious about how I've been keeping, like, small yarn samples in my notebook, I've been putting them in, ooh, that got blown out. I've been putting them in these plastic bags, and then there's this like backing that I've been using, this like sticky stuff, and like you can stick and unstick the bag in here, and then I just make sure that the sample is small enough that like I can kind of reasonably close the book, okay? It's not like, don't get me wrong, it makes a thick spot, but so do these like pages that I have been like gluing and keeping ephemera on. And I kind of want to make this notebook a fat mess anyway. I really, really like it. This is my commonplace notebook. I've been pretty happy with all of the stuff that I've been keeping in here. I've been keeping notes about future episodes and like ideas and things like that. And just like the normal journal stuff. And I've really enjoyed keeping it, I have to say. I stuck these photos in with those backings because I want to be able to take them out eventually. And then this little sample here, I also used those backings. This is the lint yarn sample. It did just end up in my notebook, along with some notes on how it ended up turning out. Yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend. This was a good addition to my art practice. Maybe you'll enjoy giving it a try. Once again, it is the end of my week, fiber friends, and I'm coming back to you with yarn, with reflections and notes, and with a reminder that although this jump cut happens in just a few seconds, it takes me so much time to spin yarn. Sometimes I get comments down below like, oh my gosh, how do you spin so much in such a short amount of time? I feel like you get so much done compared to the amount that I can get done in a similar time. There's a lot that you guys don't see. There's a lot of me like sneaking in, washing yarn while I'm like doing laundry downstairs and trying to jam in time to do these things when I can. And so this is just a reminder to be gentle with yourself about the amount of time it takes you to spin things. Again, you guys are getting such a highly edited version of the type of work that I do. Usually you get the most aesthetic version as well, which, mind you, is still not all that aesthetic sometimes. And so just keep that in mind, especially with projects like this, okay? I want to talk about the first time I ever tried to spin dog hair. I did not even have a castle style wheel at the time. I was using the electric eel wheel 6, a great introductory e-spinner. That's actually the wheel that I learned to spin on. I didn't learn to spin via drop spinning, fun fact about me. And I really wanted to spin dog hair from day one. The first time I tried to do it, I was so utterly defeated that I didn't try again for a whole year. This July, I'm coming up on my 3-year spin-anniversary. I got my wheel at the very end part of June in 2022, and so that's really exciting. 3 years later, spinning dog hair, this was actually like not a bad spin at all. I actually had a lot of fun. It was surprisingly easy compared to how I last remembered it. Even last year, like the skills that I've gained within a year of spinning have really helped me just, I don't know, get better at what I'm doing. I never thought there would be a time where I would chain ply dog hair singles, okay? Anyone who, I think I've talked about this before, how like certain fibers, right, are definitely need more twists to hold together and are more prone to breakage while you're plying, even if you're being gentle. I personally find chain plying to be a bit testy on some of my more delicate singles. I know I'm not alone in this, okay? And so there was never a time where I thought I would be able to spin my singles consistently enough or just well enough that I'd be able to chain ply them. Both these samples are chain plied, folks. I just think that's a really big step for me. That's a really big accomplishment for me personally, and it's just a reminder that if you were scared off of a fiber when you first started spinning, go back and try it again. Go back and try it again. If it's been 6 months, try it again. You're gonna find it surprisingly easy, or at least easier than it was the last time you did it. Which brings me to my next point. Prep is kind of everything when it comes to dog fiber. I stand by that if you want it to be an easier spin, and you want the yarn to be very wearable. I don't just mean wearable in that it's not going to be scratchy against your skin, right? Because some dog hairs are scratchier, and blending them definitely helps mild that out a little bit. If you de-hair the fiber, so take out the guard hairs, the really long prickly hairs, before you blend it up like I did with these two, you're also going to end up with a softer product. And then if you blend it with something like merino, right, you're lowering the micron count average in that skein. And so that's a way that makes it really wearable. It also makes it more hardy in general, in my opinion. I feel like it sheds less than something like this. Maybe I should do a real test where I like test how much something is shedding. I'm not really even sure how I'd go about that. But this was kind of the next step up in difficulty. I do think that with my dog's hair, right, he's an Anatolian Shepherd, he's double coated, if I brush him out at the right time of year, he's way less guard hair and way more like undercoat floof. And while that undercoat floof is definitely short, it's definitely not the hardest dog fiber to spin. This is future editing Brian realizing that in the first half of the episode, I kind of had my rating system flipped. So in the second half of the episode, all of the rankings that you hear and ratings that you hear from now on, it's going to be on a 1 to 10 scale, where 10 is the easiest and the softest fiber. I had it flip-flopped at the beginning of the video, but I just wanted to make it a little bit clearer for anyone who wants to use this for their own dog study, or use this as sort of like a jumping off point or reference. I think I would rate it a 7 out of 10, maybe a 7.5 out of 10 in terms of ease. And I'd give this like a 7.5 out of 10 in terms of softness as well. If I don't remove any of the guard hair, which I didn't for this one, it's not the scratchiest thing in the world. It's also not the softest thing in the world. I would not wear this right up against my neck without any other protection. Let's talk about the new dog breeds that I spun up though. I took a lot of notes on this so I would have them for this presentation. And so it wouldn't take an absolute decade for me to talk about all of these. So first, the Chow Chow. Okay, that's the majority of this skein. These are actually two separate skeins. I just twisted them up together. Okay, so these are separated, but they all look together. This is just for storage purposes, because those like little mini tiny skeins get lost in my boxes, and then when I need to find the sample for something, I can never find it. Cough, cough, I'm looking at you, my hand spun cotton sample that I found again after losing it for like, I think I mentioned this, I lost that, I spun that sample, and then I lost it for like months. I just found it again. Excited about that, but again, method behind the madness, there's a reason. Okay, the tan portion is the Chow Chow. Chow Chow softness, 5 out of 10. I think if you took the guard hairs out of this, it would be a lot softer, but the sample that I got had a lot of the guard hairs kind of like carted into the fiber, so I wasn't going to separate them. I wasn't going to separate any of the guard hairs out of the vintage fiber that I had. I felt like that was an unreasonable expectation for myself, so I kind of just spun them as they were. Softness, 5 out of 10. Ease of spin, 8 out of 10. This was easy as hell to spin, okay? And part of that might be that a lot of these were vintage fibers. These are vintage fibers that I could feel were slightly felted. But here's the thing about spinning dog hair and pet hair in general, is it's a very slippery, fast experience. The felting aided me. I don't know, it kind of held the yarn together. I think it made the whole thing a lot more like well structured and strong in general. So that might have been part of it, but the notes that I have is great color, undercoat much softer, guard hairs present. I can't even read my own handwriting. That tells you how bad it is. The Malamute, softness, 3.5 out of 10. The white was probably the least soft thing that I spun. I think it's because it was very, very heavy on the guard hairs. The staple length was pretty decent, so the ease of spin was 9 out of 10. It was incredibly easy to spin. The Russian Wolfhound, aka the Borzoi. I did want to clarify for any of you who aren't familiar with dog breeds. If you don't know what a Borzoi is, yes you do. Yes you do. It's these guys. They look ridiculous. They're windhounds. Although I'm not really a hound guy myself, I would never own a Borzoi. I do think they're magnificent, beautiful, regal dogs. Love the breed. Softness, 9 out of 10. I want to talk about this. I did not expect this to be the softest, one of the softest samples in the bunch. There was one sample that was even softer, and we're going to talk about that, and it's going to surprise you even more than the Russian Wolfhound did. Maybe it doesn't, because Borzois, they look really soft, they look really feathery to me. The softness, 9 out of 10. Ease of spin, 4 out of 10. This was slippery. This was slippery as hell. And I think part of that is, like, the softer you sort of get, I do think that that plays into the slipperiness. It was kind of a pain in the ass. So soft. The sample was slightly felted. I would love to try to spin more of this fresh, even though it was a pain in the ass, just because I'm curious about that yarn. I wonder if it applies across the breed, if it was just this really soft Borzoi that we got. Reflections on the poodle clippings, not available, okay? The poodle clippings, too felted. That poodle yarn, though, was so scratchy, guys. I just think maybe with a longer poodle fiber, okay? But you have to remember, right, that, like, hair, which I feel like poodles have closer to hair, right? And that's one of the reasons that people who are allergic to dogs and dog dander are less allergic to poodles. I won't go as far as saying that they're truly hypoallergenic, because allergies are complicated. But I will say that I feel like dogs with closer to hair fibers ended up having coarser spins, right? Because if I were to spin my human hair, which people have asked about if I've spun human hair, I haven't yet. I'm going to. This year, guys, it's coming. We're getting so weird with it on this channel and what we're spinning, clearly. We're gonna keep getting weirder with it. Human hair, though, is generally pretty coarse, like Victorian hair art and things like that, and hair accessories like watch bands or necklaces that I've seen, that a lot of the times the hair is like smoothed down and braided, because that makes it a lot less like coarse or scratchy against the skin. So I think that carding it up and spinning it would probably result in a really coarse sample, just like the poodle. Muffy Pierce, the Shih Tzu. I know a lot of you are really curious about this one, especially because it had a name with it. Unfortunately, that fiber was also unbelievably felted, and I realized that it was clippings, and so it was going to, I knew just right off the bat it was going to be like a pretty coarse spin, and so I kind of just let that one go. The Collie from Carolyn, or possibly the Collie's name is Carolyn, I'm not really sure. Softness, 8 out of 10. Ease, 8 out of 10. Notes on this one, very soft. Reminds me of Bow, honestly, a lot, but, like, easier to spin down because it was slightly longer. I think the staple length is a big factor in how easy it is to spin the Collie. And it was like Bow, but with less guard hairs mixed in, which I've heard people who have collies say that the fiber is really, really soft. But the real surprise of the study, I think the one that is probably the most interesting to me, is that the softest fiber and the easiest fiber to spin was the pulley. That is fascinating to me. Now, if I think about it on a real, like, logistical level, if I think about it on a real basic level, it kind of makes sense, okay? The softness, 10 out of 10. The ease, 11 out of 10. The fiber was so easy to spin. The staple length on this was everything. But here, the notes is where it's really important that we talk about this, okay? Because prep matters so much in this category. With the pulley, the notes was incredibly soft. The locks that were not carded, that were in like the bag of vintage dog hair, before it got into storage, felted. They locked together, which I feel like makes sense if you look at the pulley dog, right? That totally tracks. But what was left of the sample that was carded, right? There was some of the pulley dog fiber that somebody had carded up, and that fiber had not felted. And that was a breeze to spin and an absolute pleasure to feel against my skin. It was by far the softest sample that we had. I stopped showing you guys this is the other bobbin, so this is kind of, these two are kind of paired together. This is the Collie up here, and this is the pulley down here. And this gray sample is just so freaking soft. I also think that part of the reason it's so soft is because you can go really low twist with it, because the staple length is really something to marvel at, really something to revel in. And yeah, I was just really surprised by these results. Now we're going to speedrun our reflections because this video is long enough. So final thoughts on the dog study. What did we learn? What are my personal takeaways from the study? Okay, and again, like, do your own dog yarn study. If you disagree with me and you think that you're gonna come to different conclusions, like, that's kind of the point. I would like, adore seeing any other spinner do this. Please, like, don't. I hate when people are like, would you feel like I was copying you if I tried to like spin something like you, or like try that fiber? I don't own spinning yarn. I don't own spinning weird stuff. I don't own spinning wool. I don't own spinning dog yarn. In fact, no one does. And if they tell you that they do, they are frankly a bully. They are a bully, and frankly, they should not be in this hobby. You should be in this hobby, and you have every right to experiment and do all the silly things. Like, the reason that artists share, at least in my opinion, and why I come on here and share, is to inspire other artists and to contribute back to a educational system and an inspirational system that has fed me as an artist a lot these past few years. And I honestly feel like I owe something to the YouTube community, and that's another big reason that I come on here and I try to, I don't know, like, share these adventures. But without further ado, here are my reflections. Okay, I'd like to spin more, and this is your opportunity as a viewer, as a dog lover, as a dog owner. If you own any of these breeds, if you are willing to maybe set aside some of your dog's spring shed, okay, I would love if I could get, I know this is a little picky of me, but fresher fiber, clean fiber, maybe from a freshly washed dog that you brush out in the springtime, perhaps when the guard hairs are low in a lot of these breeds. If that sounds like something you might be interested in maybe contributing to for a super weird artist who is interested in continuing this study and maybe making some pieces with this work, hit me up, DM me. I'd like to spin more Spitz types, okay? Chows, Samoyed. I would love to get my hands on Samoyed. I've heard that Samoyed is like the creme de la creme of dog fibers to spin, and I would just really like to spin a sample of that. Akitas have always had a really special place in my heart. I really like those dogs. Pomeranians, Huskies, those types of dogs. Husky I'm also really interested in. And I'd like to spin more Collie, and I'd like to spin more Poolie. I'm interested in maybe doing like a rough versus smooth coated Collie, and seeing like if there's a difference in those two. I'm sure there probably is. And then if I could ever get my hands on more Poolie, I'd like to give it a go another time. I think that was such an interesting fiber. Another thing that I feel like I personally took away from this is that clippings and hair-like dogs, parentheses, poodles, have a higher likelihood for high scratchiness. Not all clippings were spiky, but if it was coarser and clipped, it's not for me. That's something that I decided as well. Carding the fiber aids in the ease of the spin significantly. I think prep is everything here. Again, I think blending it with another fiber or just carding it up in general will do a lot for you. And if you don't know what carding is, essentially, imagine if you took two big, giant dog brushes and like brushed them together to prepare the fiber, to floof it up, and to misalign the fiber so that it's easier to spin. That's kind of what carding is. If you don't have hand carders, you can just use two dog brushes. I used two dog brushes for like 6 to 8 months before I actually got some actual proper hand carders. And then felting is sometimes your friend with such a slippery fiber. I'm not going to lie. I don't really know how one could go about sort of like artificially emulating the felting that occurs after years of sitting in a cardboard box in somebody's garage. But if there is a way to emulate that, maybe do that, because it did make the fiber a lot easier to spin. It definitely prevented it from like sliding out of my hands and things like that. Whether you're coming to this video out of just sheer interest and curiosity, because this is something that, you know, not everyone does, okay? I'm not gonna like toot my own horn and be like, this is such a niche thing, but like it's a little out there for sure. I totally understand that. Whether you're coming to this video out of just sheer curiosity, or you came to this video because unfortunately you went through pet loss, or maybe you just got a puppy and you're like, I would love to memorialize my puppy's life, every year of life that he or she is on this earth. I hope that this video was helpful to you as well. There are lots of other things that you can do with pet hair, just FYI, if you are coming to this type of video, again, again, in sort of like a post-mortem fashion for your pet. You can obviously spin your pet's hair, you can get it spun by somebody else. You can also get it put into like felted art, or again, do the felted art yourself. You can do sort of like a locket type setup, which I've done before with like some spun hair from different breeds of sheep and my dog Bo as well. So there's just lots of different options for what you can do with your pet's fiber post-mortem, if that is why you ended up stumbling upon this video. I just kind of wanted to put a little disclaimer there because I know that there might be a significant portion of you who are coming to this video with that in mind. And again, my condolences go out to you if that is why you have come upon this video. I hope that my silliness throughout the video has brought a smile to your face perhaps today, and made it just a little bit easier, made you feel a little bit less out there and a little bit less weird for wanting to get your pet's hair spun in the first place or even thinking about it. As always, fiber friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share if you know anybody who might be interested in this subject, and I'll see you on the next one.